On a cold night, as a light drizzle fell, the neon lights of Neo City's futuristic gas station illuminated the wet streets. Tony Stark, famous for his off-screen heroics, stopped to recharge his electric motorcycle. Everything seemed normal until he saw something that forced him to stop. A young pregnant woman, Lisa, visibly exhausted, was running around the station. She was lifting heavy boxes and filling car tanks, barely catching her breath. What Tony did next shocked everyone at the station and changed Lisa's day completely. You won't fully understand the impact of Tony's gesture. A story is unfolding that will warm your heart and light up your hope. Before we dive into the story, close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself in this situation. Feel every moment as it unfolds. When you've watched until the end, let us know in the comments what you would have done. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. The night in Neo City was peaceful, but there was a hidden sadness. On a quiet street, a gas station shone its futuristic neon lights on the wet asphalt, soaked by the constant drizzle. For most, it was just an ordinary place. But for Lisa, the gas station was her livelihood. 7 months pregnant, Lisa started walking between the pumps with purpose, quickly cleaning windshields and checking oil for customers. Her thin jacket and worn work uniform barely protected her from the cold, but she had no time to think about it. Tonight's pay was crucial to cover 1 more month's rent. Tina, her 8-year-old daughter, sat under the station's awning, safe from the rain on a plastic chair. Her little fingers tightly gripped a worn red pencil as she focused on sketching in an old activity book. She only had 2 other small pencils, blue and yellow. With so few things, Tina poured herself into filling the pages, creating drawings full of deep meaning. As Lisa worked, the faint hum of a powerful engine echoed through the station. A futuristic motorcycle slowly rolled up to a pump. Tony Stark, in a sleek suit, got off with smooth movements and removed his helmet. His slightly messy, rain-soaked hair was revealed. Tony scanned his surroundings. His gaze lingered on Lisa for a moment. He noticed how, despite her exhaustion, she kept a friendly smile while cleaning a windshield for customers. Then his eyes moved to Tina, who was so absorbed in her sketching as if she were working on something important. Tony walked over, intrigued, and looked at the drawing. It was a simple but detailed scene: a kitchen with steaming pots and pans, a table in the center, and a counter with an empty sign. Tony bent down, carefully examining the strokes, noticing how Tina was focusing on a special spot that was still unfinished. "Do you like the drawing?" he asked softly. Tina looked up for a moment, surprised by his presence, but shyly nodded without saying anything. "I draw places I want to go," Tony smiled. "And what about this place? What is it?" Tina hesitated, glancing back at her drawing. She squeezed the red pencil in her small hand, as if deciding what to say. Before she could respond, Lisa came over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Tina, don't bother the gentleman," she said with a gentle smile. "She's not bothering me," Tony replied calmly. "Actually, I'm learning about her drawings and the places she wants to see." Lisa gave him a look that was a mix of curiosity and caution, but before she could say anything else, a car honked at the next pump. "Excuse me," Lisa said, turning towards the customer. Tony stood there for a moment, watching how Lisa got back to work. His gaze shifted back to Tina and her unfinished sketch. There was something in that moment he didn't quite understand. Tony kept looking at the drawing as Tina added more details. He didn't know why, but there was something more to that simple piece of paper than just pencil marks. It felt like a dream, and he was about to discover its meaning. Lisa cleaned the last windshield of the night, but her movements had slowed. The pain in her lower back, due to her pregnancy, was spreading with every step. She tried to hide her discomfort, but every time she bent or stretched her body to reach the glass, her face revealed the exhaustion. When the last customer left, she leaned slightly against a pump, trying to relieve the pressure on her back. Lisa took a deep breath, briefly closing her eyes to hold back the tears. It wasn't just physical pain, but also the emotional weight of the exhaustion from those long nights. From a distance, Tony noticed, but didn't approach right away. He saw how she adjusted her uniform and tried to force a smile before heading back to the station counter. Tina, sitting on her worn plastic chair, looked up from her sketchbook and saw her mom's pain. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked gently. "I'm fine, honey," Lisa replied, giving a forced smile as she sat down beside her daughter. Tony, noticing hesitation in Lisa's response, finally stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he said softly, trying not to startle her. "Do you need help with anything? You look really tired." Lisa looked at him surprised, but her true feelings were to deny any help. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Just a little back pain. It's normal during pregnancy." "Normal shouldn't mean constant," Tony said in a calm tone, his voice carrying a kindness that made Lisa stop. She shook her head, staring down at the ground. "Not much can be done, it's just part of life." Tony didn't press further, but he noticed how she supported her lower back when she sat. "Do you do this every night?" he asked. Lisa nodded, her gaze not on him, but far off into the distance. "2 nights a week here, and in the mornings I clean offices. It's how I cover rent and keep Tina in school." Tony remained silent for a moment, processing what she'd just shared. "And when do you rest?" he asked softly. Lisa gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Rest? I really don't have time for that. Bills don't wait, and the baby's coming. I'll have to work even more, no choice." "It shouldn't be this way," Tony whispered, almost as if to himself. For the first time, Lisa looked directly at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "But this is it, at least for me. I've made choices that brought me here. I can't complain." "Complaining doesn't help," she continued. Tina, who had been quietly listening, placed her small hand over her mother's. "You do everything for me, Mama." Lisa's face softened, but her eyes filled with tears. "Because you're everything, Tina. You're the reason I keep going." Tony watched the exchange between mother and daughter, feeling a deep empathy for Lisa. He understood that this woman wasn't just carrying the weight of her pregnancy and tough shifts, but also the emotional burden of making sure Tina was safe and giving her a dignified life, even when it seemed impossible. "Sometimes," Lisa began, her voice breaking slightly, "I wonder if I'm doing enough. If one day she looks back and thinks I only fought, but never truly lived, like I didn't give her something beautiful." Tina tightened her grip on her mom's hand. "You give me everything, Mama." Lisa smiled, but a shadow passed over her eyes. Tony saw that she was holding something deeper inside. "What about your father?" he asked gently. Lisa paused for a moment before answering. "When he found out I was pregnant again, he left." A lump formed in Tony's chest. He said he couldn't take on another responsibility, that taking care of one child was already hard enough. Lisa hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. So he packed his things and left. Tina looked at her mother with sad eyes but didn't say anything. Lisa tried to reassure her by squeezing her hand. "And you?" Tony asked softly. "After that, what did you do?" Lisa took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders with a practiced strength. "I kept moving because I had no choice." A car honked at pump 2, interrupting their conversation. Lisa straightened her posture and turned back to work. "Sorry, sir, duty calls." Tony stood quietly as she walked away. He saw her limp slightly with her right foot, the weight of her pregnancy evident in every step she took. His gaze shifted back to Tina, who had returned to her seat. The little girl was still gripping her red pencil, but her eyes remained fixed on her mother, watching with concern. "Your mom works so hard," Tony said softly, bending down to Tina's level. Tina nodded, holding the red pencil tightly in her small fingers. "Sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, she cries." Tony felt a pang of pain in his chest. "Why?" "Because she's tired," Tina said hesitantly. "And like Mama said, Daddy left." Before she could add more, her coloring grew even more intense, her focus sharper. "He said he couldn't afford another mouth to feed." Tony stood silent, Tina's words echoing in his mind. He looked at Lisa, and in that moment, he knew he had to do something. He couldn't ignore the look of hope still present in Tina's eyes. Tony stood by Tina, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Whatever he was about to do, it was going to change everything for them and surprise everyone. The light drizzle made the air heavy and cool. Lisa adjusted her jacket over her shoulders, the chill running through her already exhausted body. Tina, sitting beside her, was making another drawing, glancing up occasionally, as if she could feel her mother's burden. Tony stood nearby, watching the silent exchange between mother and daughter. He couldn't take his eyes off the stark contrast between Tina's innocent brightness and Lisa's visible exhaustion, despite her efforts to hide the toll of both physical and emotional struggles. "I want to ask you something." Tony finally broke the silence in a calm tone. Lisa looked at him, a little surprised, but nodded, signaling him to continue. "If you had a chance, just one, to do something different, what would it be?" Lisa hesitated. The question seemed easy, but the answer carried so much weight. She looked down at the wet ground, thinking for a moment. "I don't know. I think I don't have the luxury of thinking like that anymore. When you're paying bills and raising kids, there's no room for what-ifs." Tony understood her resistance. "I thought you must have given up a lot because of this." "Leave? That's not the right word," she said, pausing slightly, searching for the right words. "Life just doesn't allow for some things. When you're struggling just to pay the rent, you can't afford to dream." Tina looked up from her drawing and glanced at her mom. "But you still cook, Mama, and you make the best lasagna in the world." Lisa let out a soft laugh, one tinged with sadness. "Making lasagna at home and running a restaurant are two very different things, honey." "But you wanted to run a restaurant, didn't you?" Tony asked, turning his attention back to Lisa. She paused for a moment, then softly responded, "Yeah, when I was little, before Marco." Tony felt the weight in her voice as she mentioned his name. "Your husband?" Lisa nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "When we got married, we both dreamed of opening a restaurant together. He said I had a gift for cooking, but when Tina was born, things changed. It became harder. And when I found out I was pregnant again, he left." Tina squeezed her mom's hand tightly, offering silent comfort. Lisa swallowed hard and continued. He said he couldn't take on another burden, that he couldn't handle another responsibility, and then he just left. Tony glanced at Tina, who was silently drawing, and then back at Lisa, who was trying her best to maintain her composure. Maybe you think you don't have a choice right now, he said seriously, looking straight at her. But what if help came your way? What if there was a way to change things? Lisa asked, a skeptical tone in her voice. I appreciate the offer, but I don't need charity. I'm fine. I'm not talking about charity, Tony replied, his voice firm but gentle. I'm talking about an opportunity, something that could help you dream again. Lisa shook her head, clearly struggling with his words. Why do you care? She asked, her voice uncertain. I'm nothing special. Because everyone deserves the chance to dream, Tony said calmly, and because you deserve more than just getting by. Tony's tone was decisive. I'll be back tomorrow. Lisa looked at him, trying to figure out how to respond. Why? She asked. Because I believe you deserve more, he said, subtly gesturing toward Tina's notebook and the station around them. See you tomorrow? As Tony got back on his motorcycle, Lisa stood there, still puzzled. She couldn't understand what his promise to return meant, but the next day brought something she never could have imagined. The next day, as Lisa finished her shift at the gas station and was organizing her things behind the counter, she heard the familiar rumble of a motorcycle engine. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. Tina, who was still drawing nearby, looked up with curiosity. Tony parked his motorcycle at the same pump as the night before, stepping off with a calm smile and 2 large paper bags in his hands. His demeanor was relaxed, yet determined, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Good morning, he greeted as he approached. Lisa watched him warily. You really came back. I told you I would, Tony replied simply. He placed the bags on the counter and turned to Tina. Good morning, Tina. Good morning, Tina exclaimed excitedly, her eyes already on the bags, curious about what was inside. Tony looked at Lisa, noticing her hesitation. Before you say anything, I just want you to see this, he said as he opened the bags. Inside were basic groceries, some new clothes for Tina, and on top, a pristine box of brand new colored pencils. Tina squealed in joy as she grabbed the box, as if it were treasure. Pencils, she said, holding them to her chest. Thank you, mister. Lisa watched her daughter's reaction, but her eyes were on the items in the bags. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tony stopped her. I know what you're thinking, he said softly. But this isn't charity. It's just a little push to help you breathe easier. Lisa shook her head, holding back tears. I don't know if I can accept this. Tony placed an envelope on the counter. This is for the rent, just for this month. And there's one more thing. He handed her a busy-looking flyer. Lisa read it carefully. Asterisk culinary course for single mothers. She blinked in confusion. What is this? It's a free cooking course, Tony explained. It covers professional techniques, and if you ever want to take it further, it also helps with the business side. Lisa looked at the flyer, then back at Tony, clearly struggling to understand what was happening. Why are you doing this? Tony gave a small smile, his expression serious but kind. Because you deserve it. And sometimes a small act of kindness can change everything. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. I don't know what to say, Lisa said softly. Don't say anything right now, Tony replied. Just think about it, and know that someone believes in you. Tina, still holding the pencils, noticed the flyer in her mother's hand. Mama, will you learn new recipes like Grandma used to make? Lisa looked at her daughter, then at the flyer. For a moment, something shifted inside her, a small spot of hope, no matter how faint. She took the flyer, glanced at Tina, and then back at Tony. Still hesitant, but with a new spark in her eyes, she whispered, "Maybe it's time to try." Little did she know, what Tony was planning next was even more transformative. Months passed since that morning. Lisa, who had joined the culinary course, didn't just refine her cooking skills, but opened doors she had never imagined. With each class, she rediscovered her passion for cooking, and more importantly, her ability to bring people together. Tony kept his promise. During this time, he quietly worked on something big. While Lisa was learning, he gathered contacts, sought support, and found the perfect little spot nearby. It was simple but inviting, the ideal place for what was to come. One special morning, Lisa and Tina arrived at the place, unsure of what awaited them. Tony stood there, waiting at the entrance with his familiar, calm smile. "What's this?" Lisa asked, looking at the storefront. Tony stepped aside, revealing a sign above the door. It read, in beautiful lettering, *La cucina della nonna. Lisa froze, shock written across her face. She put her hand over her mouth, trying to control her emotions as tears quietly fell down her cheeks. Tina clung to her arm, her eyes sparkling with excitement. This is your restaurant, Mama," Tina exclaimed, pulling her mother toward the door. Lisa looked at Tony, disbelief all over her face. You did this? Why?" Tony smiled, though his tone was serious. "Because you deserve it. Because your story and your talent are special, and the world needs to see it. And because no one should ever give up on their dreams." They walked inside together. The setup of the restaurant was simple but had everything Lisa needed to get started. A functional kitchen, neatly arranged tables, and thoughtful details that reminded her of her grandmother's restaurant in Italy. Tina ran to a corner where a small table had been set up for children to draw, complete with the colored pencils Tony had given her months ago. Lisa ran her fingers over the surfaces, still trying to grasp the reality of what was happening. She looked at Tony, searching for the right words. I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't need to thank me," Tony replied softly. "Just do what you do best. Bring people together. And when you can, pass this kindness forward." The grand opening happened a few days later, and the restaurant quickly became a beloved gathering spot in the community. Lisa made dishes that told stories, each one inspired by her grandmother's recipes, but with her own creative twist. The food was incredible, but what made the place truly special was the heart Lisa put into every detail. On opening night, Tina proudly handed out menus at a table. Lisa was in the kitchen, preparing a lasagna, as the restaurant filled with laughter and conversation. Tony sat quietly at a corner table watching it all unfold. When Lisa brought a lasagna to his table, he smiled for a moment. "I never imagined I'd be here," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Tony looked around. "But you deserve to be here. What you've created here, everyone should experience it." When Lisa looked at the bustling restaurant, she realized her dream had come alive again. But the real change wasn't just in her life. The impact of that one act of kindness had just begun to spread through her community. The scent of freshly made food filled the air, wrapping the little restaurant in a warm embrace. Lisa arranged each dish with the same passion and care she had always had. Asterisk, La Cucina della Nonna's tables were filled with smiling customers, sharing laughter and heartfelt conversations. It had become more than just a place to eat. It was a space for connection, for shared stories, and for community. Tina, always with her colored pencils, moved between tables, proudly telling everyone that the restaurant was inspired by her grandma's recipes. Tony, at his usual table, sat quietly but unmistakably present, watching with a satisfied smile. He knew the transformation he was witnessing was deeper than the bustling room he saw. Lisa came over with a cup of coffee. "You always sit at that table," she remarked playfully. Tony smiled. "It's the best spot in the house. I can see everything." Lisa took the seat across from him, looking out at the restaurant. "I never imagined this. Not a single day goes by when I don't thank you for what you've done for me and Tina. You changed everything." Tony gently shook his head. "You changed everything. I just gave you a little push." She smiled, but her expression grew serious. "I'll never forget what you did for us, and I'll make sure to pass it on." Tony nodded. "That's all I could ever ask for. Kindness is a cycle. Now it's your turn to make a change for someone else." In that moment, Tina came to the table with her sketchbook. "Mama, look what I drew." Lisa took the sketchbook and softly chuckled. It was a drawing of the restaurant, now complete with customers, steaming plates of food, and a big sign outside that read in bold letters, Asterisk, La Cucina della Nonna. "It's perfect," Lisa said, pulling Tina into a hug. Tony stood up, leaving some bills on the table. "I think it's time for me to go." Lisa looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "You're part of this. I always will be," he replied. "But this place is yours now. It's time for you to keep writing this story." He gave Tina a warm smile before heading to the door, leaving Lisa deeply moved. As Lisa watched Tony walk away, she realized her life hadn't just changed, it had transformed. And now, she was ready to be the catalyst for someone else's transformation. What she would do next would become the next chapter in her story. A story of courage, determination, and the profound power of kindness. The message I hope to share through this story is simple yet powerful. Never give up on dreaming. Dreams are the flame that keeps hope alive within us, even in the hardest moments. They give us purpose, direction, and something to fight for. And alongside dreams, kindness becomes the thread that connects us, a quiet force that transforms lives by reminding us that no one is ever truly alone. Dreams and kindness have the power to change the world, not in grand, immediate gestures, but one life at a time, one act at a time. So believe in them, nurture them, and pass them on. Because that's how we build a more beautiful future for us all. Asterisk. Asterisk. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience. Click the screen to keep the warmth alive and discover more.